Mel, is that all? So you say all 18-year-olds.
Yeah.
Some of our England squad are probably 18 years old, about to play the Euros.
Yeah.
Could we see professional footballers also called up
Well,
to
look, I
their
can't
dues?
be drawn into this particular person or group or
Well,
whatever.
come on, either
but
it's blanket or
no,
not. Hello and welcome to Never Mind the Ballots with me, Kate Ferguson, and my team from The Sun. It's the first full week of the general election campaign and things are heating up. The Tories are trying to cut Labour's massive poll lead and they are throwing the kitchen sink at it. They've announced a string of eye-catching policies, including national service, a tax break for pensioners, and a crackdown on rip-off degree courses. But Labour, they say these promises are pie in the sky and only they can deliver the change Britain needs. So, who should you trust to get Britain working? I'm joined by a man who thinks he has the answer. It's the Conservative Work and Pensions Secretary, Mel Stride. Mel, welcome to the studio.
Hello, Kate. Lovely to be here.
Thank you. Let's kick off first with a breaking story, which is the Czech billionaire Daniel Kretinsky is making a £5 billion offer to take over and buy Royal Mail. Do you have any concerns about foreign ownership of a national asset like this?
Well, we do have very clear processes in place, Kate, whereby the Business Secretary applies scrutiny to any deal like this. She has made it very clear, for example, that we have to see the 6-day letter delivery service maintained. We have to look after the postal service for those in remote rural areas. We have to make sure that businesses get the services that they want, that the workforce are properly treated, that the business is domiciled in the UK, all sorts of things that will be looked at. So we've got a bit of a way to go with this deal.
So you're seeking assurances before you would give that deal a green light?
Yeah, so any deal, and of course it hasn't gone through the shareholders yet, but any deal that comes forward, the Business Secretary will look at that very closely. We have the legislative powers to do that, and the Business Secretary will be making those kind of judgments and others to check that we're satisfied with that arrangement.
And will you block the bid if you're not satisfied?
Well, clearly, if it fails the key tests that we'll be applying, then that might be an issue. But I don't think I'm going to get too involved in this stage at what are commercial negotiations. We don't know the full outcome.
OK,
yet.
Your Work and Pensions Secretary, huge brief. Let's dig straight into it, if we may. You've said you're going to get tough on benefits and crack down on sick note culture. But Mel, 2.8 million Brits are off work sick. Sickness benefits are predicted to climb to £90 billion by, I think, 2029, according to the OBR. You've failed, haven't you, Mel?
We've made huge progress, actually, but you're right to identify the challenge, and it's not unique to our country, which is rising long-term sickness and disability benefit claims. So what I've done is brought in some fundamental welfare reforms around the gateway into those benefits that the Office for Budget Responsibility, that's the independent judge, says will mean 440,000 fewer people will be going into those benefits over the coming years. I'm also taking sick notes that you mentioned away from GPs. We're piloting that in the autumn and creating something called WorkWell, which means when you go to get signed off at the moment, which happens in 96% of occasions, the GP signs you off as not capable of doing any work whatsoever. I want that person to be sitting with somebody at WorkWell to get the healthcare support they want, but equally the support to stay in work.
Well,
because what we're all about is work. Because work's good for everything. It's good for mental health, which is one of the big problems that we're facing at the moment.
All right, Mel, let's dig into this a bit. In Britain, lots of people fell out of the workforce in COVID. Now, in other countries, they've got back in. Here, they've really struggled to get back in. Why is that? Are we lazier? Are we sicker? Why are so many Brits
So I think what you're referring to
there,
there, Kate, is what they call economic inactivity. So they're people who aren't unemployed because they're not looking for work, but they're not signed on for benefits either. And that number has gone up since COVID. But overall, we are still in a good position when it comes to economic activity. We've got lower average rate of economic inactivity than the G7, across the EU and the OECD. So France, the United States, Italy, we're below that level. But we've got work to do, which is why things like WorkWell are very important. It's why the fundamental welfare reforms I'm bringing in are important. And it's why sanctions within the welfare system, which we may come on to in a minute, are also really important, because we should have expectations of people as well as supporting the most vulnerable.
We will come on to sanctions,
Yeah.
but why have we had such a problem with so many people dropping out of that workforce?
So, as I say, by international comparisons, we're actually still in a good place.
But we've dropped down the rankings, which is the point.
But, well, we're still about average compared to others, but you're right, since COVID, there have been issues. A lot of it is this long-term sickness and disability that we've been describing. Now, there are many drivers of that. Mental health amongst young people is a big component, and what in turn has driven a lot of that has, for example, been technology, social media, its impact on younger people, particularly younger girls, actually, where interacting with people 24/7 in friendship groups that sometimes go wrong, this idealised version of what you should be like as a young person, you know, photographic apps that touch up photographs and make everybody look perfect and beautiful. There are things in that space that have been deeply problematic. And that's why we're spending so much more on mental health support. It's why the Chancellor announced recently 400,000 new talking therapies in the NHS to address those problems.
That's interesting, Bats. Were you saying the likes of Instagram, Facebook, Snapchat, that this is damaging, teenage mental health, and we're seeing that in the workforce?
I think that is almost undeniable. In 2007, the iPhone came out and this stuff started. By 2010, we had the reversed camera, so you could photograph yourself. We had the growth of Instagram, Snapchat, and all those different apps coming on board. That exploded. It changed the way childhood worked. And there's a man called Jonathan Haidt, actually, who's written a fantastic book. He's an academic in the States.
But you say that's damaging?
Yes, there is a correlation, I believe, between mental health outcomes and the growth of these kind of technologies, which is why the government is quite rightly looking at this area and has actually passed quite a lot of legislation that results.
So how can those companies that run the likes of Instagram, do they need to take some responsibility for the mental health of our young people, and what should they be doing?
So I think government has a role, and we've already talked a lot about, for example, the use of phones within schools and whether children should be handing them in at the door so that they're under sort of lock and key until they leave, etc. So there's an access issue. There's also definitely an access to content issue, which is why we've had legislation to address that, so that these social media platforms, for example, are responsible for making sure that young people are not exposed to things that are inappropriate. So there's a lot of work to be done. But
what's your message for those? What's your message for those companies, those social media companies?
So take their responsibilities very seriously. Understand that, yes, of course, one understands that their pursuit is likes and people signing up to their platforms and traffic because they can then sell advertising on the back of it. But think of the impact that is having on younger people, and make sure that they police what they're doing properly and responsibly.
So they're fueling that mental health crisis among young people.
I think it's undoubtedly, in my opinion, social media and technology, 24/7, having all of this in your pocket in a way that you didn't many years ago, is having an impact. Look, when I grew up as a kid, right, which happened to be in a fairly small village with not many other kids around, we all mucked in with kids of all different ages, actually. There'd be a little 7-year-old running around with a 16-year-old and the rest of us. And we did active things as a group. We learned social skills. We went out and fell over and grazed our knees and did all those things that kids did at that time and at that age. And a lot of that play-based childhood has actually been lost and taken over by this technological revolution.
OK, you've talked about the fact that you've talked about tackling sick note culture among GPs and the fact that mental health culture has gone too far. What's going on there? Are doctors signing people off sick when they shouldn't be signed off sick?
I think GPs are doing a fantastic job. They do an incredible job. They're highly trusted by the public, and rightly so. They are under a lot of pressure. And what we know on sick notes, for example, there are 10 million issued a year, OK? And what we know is that the average time that somebody spends in front of a GP getting a sick note is 7 minutes. Now, that's not the fault of the GP. It's simply the fact that they've got a lot to do. And what they don't have the time to do is to discuss their situation. So if you came into me as the GP with a bruised hip...
So they just don't have the resources.
You might be signed off. If you go to what I'm setting up, you'll sit down with somebody who gives you the treatment for the bruised hip, but also says, let's keep you in work. Let's talk to your employer. Let's see if we can move your desk to the ground floor instead of the upper floor so you don't have to cope with the stairs. But let's keep you in work, because work matters. And particularly when it comes to mental health, Work improves mental health.
There's another thing I've got to get onto with you now, which is that you obviously did this big appeal for people that were taking early retirement, those people over 50, to go back to work if they can.
Yes.
You said if they can, they should even get on their Deliveroo bikes and go back to work. Are you a bit annoyed that not many over 50s heeded your cry?
No. Well, firstly, I don't think we should disparage jobs. And I've met people over 50 who have jobs that involve cycling around and are very happy with it. But no, I never said on your bike, and I never said go and get a delivery.
That was how it was written up.
Of course it was written up, because that was a fabulous headline, and I totally get that. Perhaps I was rather naive and silly to have gone round to Deliveroo to talk about flexible working.
Over 50s can do Deliveroo if they want to, can't they?
And of course they can, and some people do. But I never said, look, over 50s should be doing any particular type of job. And in fact, in the press quotes that I gave at the time, I made it very clear that it wasn't for me to be prescriptive about what people chose to do.
Would you like to see more people over 50 who have maybe cut down on their hours or already retired take up these kind of maybe these 0-hour jobs you can kind of dip in and out
So
of?
I think employers who really need employment, we have high levels of vacancies in the economy, and we have done for some time, need to show a flexible approach, particularly to those who are over 50. Now, over 50-year-olds have fantastic experience of life. They tend to be really good at interacting with customers and other people in businesses, and where businesses can have a flexible approach to them, they can often benefit. And some companies are very good at doing that.
But
Aviva, B&Q, they're fantastic. Yeah.
Is it these people's civic duty, their national duty, to also get a job, though, these over 50s? We've got so many vacancies.
Yeah, I don't think there's a national duty to do that, and I totally respect the fact that some over 50s have worked very hard, done very well in their life, they're very comfortable, and they choose to do other things, and that's entirely their decisions. It's not for me in any way to criticise that. But what I do think is that people need to think very carefully about their future. We're living a lot longer than we ever have done, Kate. And some people perhaps reach the age of about 50 and think, oh, I'm well enough off and I'll just, stop now. Well, actually, they need to really carefully think about that decision so that they've got enough fuel in the tank financially to get them through to their final days. Yeah.
If the polls are to be believed, Mel, there's quite a few Tory MPs who might soon be out of work. If you lost your seat, would you get on your Deliveroo bike if needed?
I don't think about losing my seat, Kate. I think about winning my seat, OK? And I will be, straight after this interview, going down to central Devon and campaigning, and I will fight for every single vote, as hundreds of excellent Conservative candidates up and down the country are doing as we speak. We are fighting, because look, what's at play in this election, right, is progress and all the things that we've discussed on welfare and getting people into work, having a plan, or Labour as an alternative with no plan. And in my area, Kate, what that means is they have nothing to say about the fundamental welfare reforms that I brought in. I don't know where they stand. What they have said is they want to scrap what they call pernicious sanctions for those who don't work, which will cost billions of pounds and stop people going into work.
I've got one more question that I've got to ask you, quickly about pensions. You have previously, you've said this week you're going to announce a triple lock plus to pensions.
Yes.
Which is when you get tax breaks along with those, the pension going up. But can I just tell you something you said last September in an interview? You said in the very, very long term, if you have an arrangement like the triple lock that needs to keep ratcheting up pensions by the highest of 3 different metrics, it seems to me it does become unsustainable in the long term. Do you still think the pensions triple lock is unsustainable in the long term?
So I used the expression, I'm glad you read the whole quote there, because I said in the very, very long term, and that was for good reason. And I was referring there to Parliament's time, decades' time. There is no doubt mathematically that is the case. In the here and now. Eventually, we will need to get rid of the pensions triple lock. Look, I made that remark in the context of decades in the future, and who knows what the future will look like. But what is happening in the here and now is we are cutting taxes for 8 million pensioners. It's fully funded, fully affordable. It'll be there within all the OBR's scorecard numbers, so it will all add up. What Labour are doing, Kate, is dismissing this entirely, saying don't do it, which means that millions of pensioners will be dragged into tax over the coming years. So this is a retirement tax, that No Idea Care is bringing forward.
No Idea Care, right.
Well, I coined that yesterday and it's taken off. No Idea Care, there we are.
All right, another pensions question, if I may. We've had the WASPI Women Report. This was a landmark review into these women that were born in the 1950s who saw their pension age change, and they say they weren't told about it.
Yes.
Now, it found that they could be owed up to £10.5 billion, and it recommended women should get between £1,000 and £3,000 each if they were affected. Now, yes or no, Mel, if you are re-elected, will you pay those women that money?
So the commitment that I made, Kate, and I made it at the dispatch box in the Commons as soon as that Ombudsman's report that you've referred to landed, was that I would look at this without undue delay. It's a complex matter. I'm really disappointed that the general election has interceded.
Well, I mean, it's
that.
pretty easy to work out, isn't it? Have you got the money and do you plan to pay it?
Well, there are many. We could have a very long conversation about it, but there are. I think it took 5 years to produce that report. These are matters that go back to 1995, 30 years ago.
But this is the review's finding, and its recommendation is very clear.
And it also said that Parliament should be the body that is the key part of making that process. So I've appeared before a select committee to discuss it. We've had a debate.
Sounds like you're trying to wriggle out of it now. You're leaving a big landmine for the Labour government coming
Not at all.
in,
If I'd rushed to some kind of a conclusion, I've no doubt everybody would have criticised it and said that I'd rushed it, and they'd be right.
But you don't need to rush to a conclusion.
But to give everybody justice on all sides of this argument, it needs to be thought through properly. I was well into the process of doing that. It's a shame the general election has come along, but if we are re-elected, I am still the Secretary of State after the general election. It will be one of the first things on my desk.
First thing on your intro.
Yeah.
All right, let's do some kind of other questions, shall we? A bit more off-piste. Do you think Sir Keir Starmer, is Sir Sleepy?
I wouldn't use that expression.
Why not? Your colleagues are.
Well, I've got a vested interest, Kate.
Why is that?
I may look 25, but I'm not 25. Okay. No, I think people.
Yeah, because you're right. Keir is 61. You're 62.
Exactly. So we're of the same age, and I'm full of energy and up and atom and all the rest of it. And I think I've got something to offer. And
so you're offended by the attack? Should your colleagues pipe down?
I don't think it's an expression that I would use. Mine is no idea, Keir, because I think what you do.
But should your colleagues ditch the expression?
Is you focus. Well, as I've said, I don't think that's something that I would use. It's up to others to make that decision for themselves. But my view is that what you put a focus on is not people's age. You put a focus on how they perform and what they've got to offer. And at the moment, we just don't know what Labour have to offer.
All right. You guys say you're the party of tax cuts.
Yes.
You've offered a tax cut already in that manifesto pledge to pensioners. What other tax cuts would you like to see? So
tax cuts going forward are the preserve of the Chancellor and the Prime Minister. It certainly wouldn't be right for me to give any commentary on. But
you're the work and Pensions Secretary.
Yes, absolutely.
Work.
Yes, absolutely. That's why I was so delighted that we made work pay even more by cutting national insurance.
Those are previous tax cuts.
This is really important. No, but they're very significant, and they're just filtering through now to people's pay packages. That's 29 million people, on average, an average worker getting £900 tax cut under this government.
You're promising more tax cuts. Are we going to see more tax cuts on workers, just like we've seen tax cuts already announced on pensioners?
So we've made it very clear that the area that we are really focused on is further reductions in national insurance, because we recognise that we've got a double taxation. People are paying income tax and national insurance at the moment, and we don't think that's fair. So we've slashed national insurance by 1/3.
And you want to keep doing that, do you?
Our aspiration through time is to reduce that to zero. In other words, abolish national insurance. But that will take quite a lot of time.
How long? How long will that take?
Well, it depends on the economy. I mean, look, Kate, if you've got a Conservative government where we've seen growth in the last quarter, equal fastest of any country in the G7, we've seen inflation
but we want to know when our taxes are going to be cut.
But this is part of the answer. We've seen inflation fall from 11% back to normal levels, real wages growing in each of the last 10 months. If we can keep that progress going, which we can with our clear plan, and not blow it all with Labour who don't know what they stand for at all, if we can do that, then we can make more progress faster in terms of cutting those taxes. But that's a clear choice in this election. It's a clear choice.
So the choice of our viewers today will be nix cuts with the Tories or no nix cuts with Labour. Is that what you're saying?
What I'm saying is it's clear that we have a very clear aspiration to further reduce national insurance going forward. We need a strong economy to do it, which is why we've been able to make the progress to date. But if we're going to do more, it's only a Conservative government that's going to be able to deliver.
But inheritance tax, Chancellor was dangling that the other day. Could we see some inheritance tax cuts pulled out the bag in this manifesto?
Well, you'll have to wait for the manifesto.
What would you like to see?
Well, I can't. No, you're very good at trying to draw me into all these off-the-cuff pledges on taxes and things. I've given you the general direction. I've given you the area that we're particularly interested in. And the clear argument that it's this party that can deliver.
All right, Mel, it's been quite heavy, so we're going to do some quick fire questions to try and lighten things up a bit, I should say. OK, what's your work in Pensions Secretary? What's the worst job you've ever done?
I worked in a bar when I was very young,
Yeah.
in a hotel, and I had a very unfortunate experience, Kate.
Go ahead.
Amongst my big responsibilities was toasting sandwiches on the counter, OK? And I toasted one. I got the timing wrong, and it started to catch fire, and it set off an alarm, and a fire engine, in fact 2 fire engines, then appeared on the cathedral green, on all that lovely grass, you know, which then got churned up by the fire engine wheels, and I got fired.
You basically
got fired.
You
Not
started
because,
an actual fire.
In the toaster.
In the toaster,
and it was smoke everywhere. The fire, and I think in those days, many decades ago, if that happened, I think the business actually had to pay something for the fact that the fire engine might have come out, a call-out charge, and it was all very unfortunate. And they were terribly pleasant to me, and they said, you know, I'd done a brilliant job in every other way, but, you know, maybe toasting sandwiches wasn't my thing.
Not your forte.
Yeah,
okay,
I've never done it since.
You've not done it before?
No.
When was the last time you pulled a sickie?
I can't remember having a day. Genuinely, I'm not trying to be a saint.
On.
No, I work every single day of the week, including Christmas Day and my birthday.
That's depressing.
Well, it's just the way I am. You know, when I retire, I'll make it up to my family.
Have you ever had a bad boss, Mel?
Nobody who sticks out as having been really awful.
No,
Rishi's
you get
great.
frustrated with Rishi Sunak sometimes?
No, not at all.
Never.
He's trusted me
Right.
to do all the things I want to do. He's supported me all the way through because we believe in getting people into work and we believe that work matters. And that's just been central to what we've been doing.
Talking of the PM, you were, I think, the ringleader of what was dubbed the Balti plotters or the Poppadom plot, which is
the argy-bargy.
The argy-bargy plot.
The sun has the best head. It does, yeah.
Which was your kind of curry nights, which you organised to raise support for Rishi to get him to be PM. What's your favourite curry, Mal?
I like a really hot curry. So I like a vindaloo, personally, and probably lamb, because I think it soaks in the flavours really well. I go for the hot end of curry, and I love curry.
Right, OK. Thank you so much, Mel, for your time. Up next, the Sun Cabinet will give us their verdict on Mel Stride's performance and put their own questions to the Work and Pensions Secretary. So, we've just heard from the Work and Pensions Secretary Mel Stride, but also listening into what Mel had to say was the Sun Cabinet, who are armed with their own questions. Joining us is our Health Secretary, Pasha Mukherjee, our Home Secretary, Jonathan Taylor, and our Education Secretary, Carrie-Anne Booth. Our Education Secretary. Go ahead, it's all yours.
Thank you. Nice to meet you, Mel.
And you.
I'm just wondering, with the announcement of the new National Service Scheme, how on earth is that going to benefit our young people? And wouldn't the money be better being ploughed into our education services, where there's lots of improvements that need to be made?
OK, it's a really good question. So I think there's a lot of money that is going into education, funding per pupil going up through time and so on. We've just made a big announcement today about more apprenticeships because we think that's a particularly valuable way of giving young people the confidence, connections and skills to get on in life. So we're going to be delivering 100,000 more of those by the end of the next Parliament. But on national service, I think this is a really strong idea for 18-year-olds, actually, giving them that sense of purpose, so social connections, the leadership skills, the kind of building blocks that are often so important for getting on in life. And if you look at where it's being, that approach is being applied overseas, in Sweden, where they have a similar system, 80% of those young people that go through that say at the end of it that they would be prepared to actively recommend that approach to a friend. So I think if we can get it right, there's more work to be done, but if we can get it right, I think it'll be a fabulous thing for young people to do.
And you say it's going to be mandatory, but you're not able to enforce it. So how are you going to approach the fact that if some young people don't want to do it, what's like the next step?
OK, so it will be mandatory. In the same way, incidentally, of course, attending school is mandatory. You know, there are certain things we expect people to do in life because we think there's particular value. Well, this is why this approach, actually, some people have said it's all about conscription into the army. It's not. About 5% of it will be a competitive process because a lot of young people will want to do this, to have a year's experience in the armed forces. But for the other 95%, of course, there's a whole variety of different things that people could get involved with, including helping out in the NHS or St John's Ambulance or the Red Cross or delivering prescriptions or whatever it may be on a periodic basis throughout the year. But in terms of the mandatory element of it. It won't be, for example, something that will lead to people being arrested or fined or anything of that nature, as some people have speculated. We want to have a look at a system that's very much built around incentives as much as around sanctions.
That's interesting, because we've heard some of your colleagues suggest that maybe parents could be prosecuted, fined. You're ruling that out today?
Totally, because this is for 18-year-olds. This is for people who are adults and are responsible for what they do. It's not for parents to bear the responsibility for an 18-year-old's actions.
Okay,
they're grown up in their own right.
What are the incentives you're alluding to?
So it could be things, and I'm speculating here because these are things that we're going to have a Royal Commission that will look into all these different things so we absolutely get it right. But, applications to employers, if somebody has done this and done it well, I think that should be something that should be a big tick in the box, and employers should recognise that people have done this and done well at it.
So they could get fast-tracked into better jobs?
Well, I think it could just be recognised in a way that is useful when you make a job application. We see that at the moment with the Duke of Edinburgh Awards, for example. A lot of young people do that.
Would it not be better as an opt-in scheme? Because not all 18-year-olds are clueless. Like, some 18-year-olds have a really good goal in mind, and it would be probably a better scheme as an opt-in scheme rather than you have to do this.
Yeah, well, look, I think 18-year-olds are far from clueless. I think they've got masses of potential, but what we want to do is invest in them, put this money and this resource and this effort into a fantastic scheme that will give them that real life-changing experience. And a lot of young people, if you talk to them in their 20s and you say, tell me about your life and what happened, they can actually normally identify a moment. It's normally around that age where they did something that boosted their confidence and meant that they got in life so much better as a result. And we want all 18-year-olds to benefit from that.
Mel, is that all? So you say all 18-year-olds.
Yeah.
Some of our England squad are probably 18 years old, about to play the Euros.
Yeah.
Could we see professional footballers also called up to
I
their
can't be
dues?
drawn into this particular person or group or whatever.
Come on, either it's blanket or
it's a
not.
fair question, Kate, in as much as I think we would have to recognise that there might be certain circumstances under which there would need to be some forms of exemption.
Some opt-out for our footy.
Absolutely. I mean, clearly, there are people that my department looks after in terms of the most vulnerable in society and so on, who for whom this kind of approach would not be appropriate.
Sure,
and that
but also people doing certain jobs already, so, I don't know, actors, footballers.
You're trying to draw me into making specific points on specific situations, but which I don't think would be right to do. But I think the general principle that you've raised is absolutely right. There will inevitably need to be some, probably quite narrow.
Mel, just on that,
Jonathan.
Sorry, Jonathan, this is our Home Secretary,
yes, I
Jonathan.
recognised him instantly.
Go ahead, Jonathan.
It's very interesting that hearing that, because one of the questions I can ask and was going to ask is that sort of a knee-jerk reaction to that 4.5 youth inactivity? Because that's that area where there's an awful lot of inactivity, which is the 16 to 24-year-olds. So is this like a knee-jerk reaction to that?
Well, I think it's in the area of wanting to give young people the skills, the connections and the confidence they need to carry on. Now, a lot of things play into that, and you're right to raise skills. Now, youth unemployment under this government has fallen since 2010 by over 40%. In fact, under the last Labour government, it went up by about 44%. So big increase in youth unemployment under Labour, big decrease under us. And that's because we've concentrated on the skills, on the apprenticeships, on getting educational
maybe not
standards
mental
up.
health services, mental health.
Mental health, huge amount. The chance.
But just because we're going to run out of time, just to answer the question directly, is this basically a bid to get young people off their Xboxes and doing something, out doing something?
I think it is important and it's valuable for young people to, you've expressed it as out doing something. I would say it's out engaging in valuable activity that adds to their skills, adds to their confidence, these building blocks, the transformative life experiences. That's what we want to give people. Now, it's certainly true under COVID that a lot of young people, and their mental health did suffer as a result of this, did get grounded at home, often glued to technology, etc. And I think that did have a detriment, and we discussed that at length earlier, Kate. But this is kind of giving them something that's really positive and a really good thing to be doing.
I want to throw it open to our Health Secretary, if I may now. Pasha, all yours.
I actually think this is a really good plan, and when I was 18, I think it would be something I would have definitely wanted to sign up to. I do think there's a benefit in terms of getting our young people back into discipline, which I hope, and also having a community orientation and thinking about more than just themselves and thinking about their community, which I do think is lacking in our current generation. However, you did mention that it's about encouraging people to go into work. And as a working professional myself, I don't feel that it is any good working anymore. It's no longer incentivized to work. It's much easier to just go on the dole or go on sick pay because it feels as if you get punished for working because you get punished with taxes. You get punished with having savings. If you save up and buy a property and you want your children to benefit from that, you get punished at every point for actually being sensible with your money in this country. And actually, if I decided to just throw my money away, go on holiday, spend it on drugs, whatever I wanted to, it feels like the government is ready to pander to those people and give them all the support. You're talking about supporting people who are currently already on sick leave back into work. Why not give that support to people who are currently working?
Yes, right. That is a brilliant question. So I'll take it in two parts, if I may. The first part is, what about those who are receiving welfare benefits? What are we doing in that area? What I have introduced is a system whereby if somebody is given support for a period of 12 months, training and so on and finding jobs, and at the end of that period, there is a job available for them to take, but they turn around and say, do you know what, I don't fancy doing that. Then as far as I'm concerned, their benefits are removed, okay? That is a very dramatic step to take. I would only do it in the case of people who are able to work, have had 12 months worth of support, have a job available and ready to take them, but they're not prepared to take it.
How do you decide who's able to work? I'm originally from India. There are people there who are disabled, who are, who have various different capabilities, and they still find a way to work because they have to. You'll see on the streets now people who have really severe disabilities who are out there trying to sell something, making a living.
We must look after those people, totally. And as a civilised society, a hallmark of a civilised society is how you look after the most disadvantaged, and we must do that, and we will continue to do that. But for those that can work and are just basically not willing to do so after a lot of support, after a period of a year, then I'm afraid, benefits are not appropriate. Now, on the other part of your question, work, what we have done is made it much more incentivised by dropping taxes. And I'll give you two examples. One is we've dropped national insurance, that's the employee charge, which is worth £900 to the average worker in this country.
But we've gone through this.
But the second thing which we didn't mention is the national living wage. That's for the lowest paid workers. That went up last year by about 10%. It's gone up this April by about 10%. That's way above the level of inflation because we want those on the lowest wages to be getting more. So we can create a greater gap, a greater incentive for people to work than to be on welfare.
But you don't want to pay people who are skilled, and skilled workers like doctors, nurses, actually people, you're almost closing that gap between the minimum wage and people who are maybe in the middle wage scale, but you're not paying them the equivalent value.
So the key to getting wages up, and we've seen real wages on average rising in each of the last 10 months, is greater productivity, the output per worker. And that's where investing in, for example, the area that you're responsible for, the National Health Service, is really important.
OK, Mel, I'm going to have to move along, I'm afraid. Sorry. I want to bring in the Home Secretary again. Do you feel overly clobbered by tax, underappreciated for the work you do? Is it easier to be a benefits scrounger today than it is to be a hard-working?
I never use that term, Kate.
No. What do you think?
We've seen other terms like the sick note culture, and yet there is, without a doubt, there is. And it was interesting again that I did read that is it artificial intelligence is going to be used to decide whether or not somebody should be in receipt of it. And I think, OK, I'm a big one for technology. I get all that. And, I talk about it every week. However, I just think, are the voters, are the public going to, actually, when they put their letter in or they requested these 25,000 letters a day, are they really going to appreciate the fact that it's going to be a computer program that's actually going to say yes or no?
No. Right, OK, that is a brilliant question. Artificial intelligence is going to be at the core of driving up productivity, which in turn will raise wages. So it's a good thing, but it has to be used responsibly. So your very good point about the 25,000 letters a day, which is what my department receives, often from very vulnerable people needing help. It's very difficult to go through 25,000 letters, read them all, assess them, work out who needs more help and a quicker response than others. Artificial intelligence can do it in hours, whereas you would need thousands of human beings who wouldn't do it as well. But and this is the point. No, the point where the empathy comes in, and this is the vital point, John, at all uses of artificial intelligence, it must be a human being that takes the final decision. That is absolutely critical. So AI can be used in benefit applications, but it must be a human being who ultimately decides what happens.
Do you have
And that's
trust
an
in our
important
ability
thing.
to kind of digitise like that? Like, it seems that whenever,
Yeah, we're
you'll know
doing
in the
it.
NHS, whenever there's a new computer system rolled out, it seems that it always
No, we're
ends
doing
up
it.
falling over.
The AI system that Jonathan is aware of, which is called Whitemail, does exactly as we've described. We've also got something called A Cube that we're trialling in our job centres, where if we're having an interaction, you're looking for a job, it's able to assess the next best move much more quickly and intelligently even than the person that's having a conversation with you. But the person
Rise of the robots
will have the final decision.
I'm going to ask each of my cabinet here actually a question. Oh no, a suggestion, and then I'm going to throw it back to you, Mel. If you could see one thing in the manifesto, the Tory manifesto, what would you want in it? I'll go to you, Pasha.
I would like to see tax rebates for positive financial and health behaviours, because we don't reward people who actually are doing their job
Tax breaks
well.
for savers, tax breaks for people that are healthy.
Yeah.
What would you like to see?
Just more to be done to keep our education system on its feet, keeping the teachers in the school, because the retention rates of teachers at the moment is absolutely shocking, and schools feel like a sinking ship.
Feel like a sinking ship, that. And can I go to the Home Secretary?
I'm waiting to see if a party can come up with actually a plausible way to actually deal with illegal immigration effectively, because that is not happening from the Tories or Labour or anybody. Because I think it's quite impossible in many ways, unless you bring in some stringent sort of restrictions, which we're not going to do. We're worried about doing that, which brings us back to that sort of culture of it's a bit too hot to handle.
Right, OK, Mel, let's take each of those briefly, but in turn. Can you stop the boats? You've told our viewers you can, but they're still coming.
Yes, we can through time, but we've
through
already...
Time? You've had 4 years.
We've reduced the numbers coming over by about a third last year. We cooperated very closely with the French stop.
But we've heard this
Hold on a second.
before.
Hear my question, my answer. We've stopped about 26,000 illegal crossings last year as a consequence of that, but we need to go a long way further. Now, what we know is we had a returns agreement with Albania. So when Albanians came over here, they went straight back to Albania. That reduced the level of illegal migration from that country by 93%, almost overnight, because people knew it wasn't worth it. That's where Rwanda comes in. We put the legislation through. We have the planes booked. We have the airfields identified. We have people processing the applications. Within a matter of a month or so, we will see flights going out.
Pasha, you don't look convinced.
That will break the model, because at the moment you've got criminal gangs exploiting people for profit, some of them drowning in the dark seas of the Channel, which is an absolute criminal tragedy and must be stopped. But we've got to get the incentive out of the way. We've got to show that it doesn't pay, actually, to come over
We're
here.
in an election campaign. You guys have the keys to number 10 until at least July the 4th. After that, who knows? You might lose them. But will you get a flight off before July the 4th? And if not, why not?
So the Prime Minister, when we got the legislation through, which was only just very recently, made it clear that it would be around 10 to 12 weeks from that point. So it's now about, I suppose, 10 weeks away or thereabouts. What we know definitely, Kate, is that Labour have said on this specific point that if they get into office, even if the Rwanda scheme is working, they will stop it.
Well, no guarantee.
And they will have an open door.
I noticed there's no guarantee you'll do it.
Open door
you've
with
still got
Labour.
the keys to number 10. Pasha's point was about tax incentives for people to work hard, save hard, take care of themselves, contribute to society. This sounds like a very Tory idea. Are you going to take it back to Rishi today?
I think there's a lot to be said, actually, sort of around that argument, particularly around occupational health and making sure that right upstream, you know, when people start to fall out of the workplace for reasons of ill health, they start in work and then they drift further and further and further away from it until they end up on long-term benefits, and then it's very difficult to get them back into work. So occupational health in the workplace is really important. And there we have consulted, actually, the Treasury did this, on tax incentives for businesses and maybe individuals too, to actually engage with that.
There we go. Tax breaks potentially for people engaging in occupational health. We've not got long. We're going to quickly
linking
go
directly to that and talking about occupational health.
We've only got 10 seconds.
And keeping people in work. Teachers are burning out because paying conditions are just a mess. So
can you give an assurance to teachers?
You're losing teachers.
We will absolutely support our teachers. We've been recruiting more teachers. We've been giving
retention's the issue.
Extra amounts for different types of teachers. And look, the proof of the pudding is in the results. Across all the international tables, the PISA tables, etc., this country's performance in maths, and we've got the best readers in the Western world now, OK? It's shot up. If you look at schools about
We're gonna have
about
to wrap
80-odd
this up, I'm
percent
afraid.
of good or very good, according to Ofsted now. That figure was 68%.
Okay, all right. Schools improving, but teachers still feeling burnt out, which is the key point there. Anyway, we could be here all day, couldn't we? But I'm going to have to wrap up. They're screaming at me through the ear. All right, thank you so much for that, everybody. That's all we have time for. I want to thank Mel Stride so much, the Work and Pensions Secretary, for being our guest. Thank you for the Sun Cabinet for their insights and fab questions, as always. Don't forget, you can subscribe to us on youtube.com/Sun Election. Tune in every day for Never Mind the Ballots. Thanks very much.